I've learned how like us they are. And while I was studying their behavior out in the wild, science was learning more and more about how they're like us biologically. Like we share 98.6% of our DNA with them. And but you know, the main thing is that out in the wild, you see the same long-term bonds between family members. You see good mothers and bad mothers. You see communication by kissing, embracing, holding hands, patting one another, swaggering, shaking the fist. I only had money for 6 months. So it was very worrying. Would I learn enough to get more money? Or if they went on running away, would it all come to an end? But luckily, one chimpanzee, and you see him up here behind me, David Greybeard, and he began to lose his fear. And it was he who taught me how chimpanzees use and make tools. And that brought in the National Geographic Society, and they sent a photographer, Hugo van Lauwijk, to film what I was learning. Then the next difficulty always has been getting money to keep the research going. Still a difficulty today, but yeah. The point is, when I learned how chimpanzee numbers were decreasing around the world, and you know, forests were disappearing, I decided I would have to go to Africa and find out for myself. I learned a lot about the chimps' problems, like habitat destruction, human populations growing, farming, mining, logging. The bushmeat trade was growing, animals killed for food commercially, not just for subsistence. And then they were caught in traps set by hunters for other animals. Their habitats were being fragmented by roads, and they're so like us, they're susceptible to all our diseases. But at the same time, I was learning about the plight of so many people living in and around chimp habitat, the terrible poverty, lack of health and education, and degradation of the land. There were more people living there than the land could support, too poor to buy food from elsewhere. Farmland was overused and infertile. In their desperation, they were cutting down the trees, even on the very steep slopes, and that was causing terrible erosion, and the little streams were getting silted out. The people were struggling to survive, and that's when it hit me. If we don't help these people find ways of making a living without destroying the environment, we can't even begin to try to save the chimpanzees. So that's when the Jane Goodall Institute, JGI, began a program called Take Care, or TACARE, we call it, TACARE. And that program began in a small way, 12 villages around Gombe. And we chose a small team of local Tanzanians. So everywhere, it's alleviating poverty, protecting the environment, and protecting the future of not only chimpanzees, but the other animals who live in the forests. First of all, to go back to the interconnection of everything. The major cause behind both the pandemic and the climate crisis is our complete disrespect of animals and the environment. So as you destroy an environment, you force some animals into closer contact with people, and like raiding crops for food, sometimes going into villages to try and steal food because their own food supply has diminished as their environment has been destroyed. And this can create a situation where a pathogen, a virus, a bacteria can jump from an animal to a person. And there it may bond with a cell in the human body, and it may create a new disease. Almost all new diseases that appear amongst humans worldwide can be traced back to an infection from an animal, and they're called zoonotic diseases. But then we also traffic animals. We send them from different parts of the same area, region, even different countries, and them and their parts. And some of them go to the wildlife markets of Asia to be sold as food, as medicine, or in the exotic pet trade. And this is creating the perfect opportunity for a virus to jump. And that's how this current pandemic, COVID-19, almost certainly began in a wildlife market in China. But there's wildlife markets in other parts of Asia too. And on top of all of that, there are intensive farms where animals are bred in large numbers, usually in terrible conditions for food. And what we have to realize when we look at these farm animals in crowded conditions, concentration camps for animals, they are individuals with personalities, minds, and emotions. Chimpanzees are so like us that I was able to persuade science back in the early 60s that we are part of and not separate from the rest of the animal kingdom. And I shouldn't even have given them names. They should have had numbers. That was scientific. But fortunately, I had not been to university, so I didn't know all that. And anyway, here's my great teacher, Rusty. That opened the door to us realizing we're part of all this amazing animal kingdom. Way back in the late 60s, I read a book called Animal Liberation. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know about factory farms at that time. I was shocked. And the next time I looked at a piece of meat on my plate, I thought, this is symbolic of fear, pain, death. Who wants something symbolizing fear, pain, and death inside them? Oh, I never touched meat again. We all have more than we need. And what's going to happen? There's 7.2 billion of us now on the planet, roughly. There's supposed to be closer to 10 billion in 2050. Already we're using up some natural resources faster than Mother Nature can replenish them. So what's going to happen? We're not supposed to talk about population growth. It's supposed to be politically sensitive, and you get accused of all kinds of racism and discrimination and blaming the poor for climate change when the problem has been mainly caused by our unsustainable lifestyle, which is true. But facts are facts. 7.2 billion now, 9.7 to 10 in 2050. If we carry on with business as usual, what's going to happen? And I think that's why, as we think about emerging from this pandemic, which we will, we always do, we emerge from the Black Death, we emerge from Spanish flu, but people are beginning to think about the need to make a new relationship with the natural world, a new relationship with animals, a more harmonious existence, a new green economy. I have a great friend who visited Taiwan many times. He's a publisher of children's books, and he went to Taipei quite often. And he told me about a very unpleasant place in Taipei, Snake Alley. In Snake Alley, they sometimes sold infant chimpanzees as pets. Jason Hu invited me there to talk about, environment and stuff. And he took me to Snake Alley, and no baby chimps, no baby orangutans, no live snakes. I thought to myself, well, maybe they just tidied it up for my visit. So I had another friend who was living in Taiwan, and he arranged to take me secretly, away from all the government and everything. And I put on dark glasses and I loosed my hair And we went, it was about 10 o'clock at night. No chimps, no snakes. The worst we saw was somebody showing film of dogfights. Oh. And to my amazement, this man at 10 o'clock at night in Snake Alley with my dark glasses and my loose hair, he said, I know you, you're the chimpanzee person. I thought, wow, pretty amazing. What's fascinating to me is that during these years I've been coming, Taiwan has gone through the stages of almost every developing country, at first destroying its natural resources for development, and then realizing what was happening and beginning to put money into restoring the environment. That's what I love about Taiwan. So along with Kelly, JGI Taiwan, and our Roots and Shoots program, I have visited, Kelly can fill in the names and everything, but I went to a wonderful project where the water from a very, very polluted river is directed through a whole series of different plants. And by the time it comes through these cleaning, healing plants, the water is crystal clear. And I've seen, other projects that show that Taiwan is really working very hard to restore what it destroyed. My expectation is that when you get children as young as possible involved in understanding who animals are, that they're not just things, that they have feelings like us, that when children have a chance to get out into nature and learn about nature firsthand, not just from reading boring old books, but actually getting out there, then they develop an ethic of understanding and therefore wanting to protect the natural world. Young people can join the Roots and Shoots movement that is, as I say, in 65 countries. And every group of Roots and Shoots chooses 3 projects, one to help people, one to help animals, one to help the environment. And so Kelly started these, the Green Thumb. And this is in schoolyards, instead of having nice, exotic, pretty looking bushes that we think are nice. No, it's indigenous plants grown for butterflies, so that once again, butterflies have a way of flying across the country from schoolyard to schoolyard to schoolyard. They're growing organic food. So getting involved in a Roots and Shoots program is very important for the future of Taiwan. And people can join the Institute, they can volunteer. We have an office there. And yes, so that's what people can do to help. But, the most important thing for people to realize is that every day, every one of us lives, we make some impact on the planet. And probably just about everyone in Taiwan can make ethical choices.
Oh.